Hello folks, Ryan Roxie here from the Alice Cooper Band, and you are listening to Epic Footnote.
Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to our new interview series. It's There Goes My Hero. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zach.
And if you haven't joined us one of these before, like I said, it's our brand new interview series. This time, I think you're in for a real treat. And this is one of the bands that Zach and myself, over last summer when we were going out to concerts, we actually had a chance to see this. And it was my first time actually seeing the Alice Cooper Band. I had a lot of fun. And Zach, well, you have a very, I want to say, near and dearness to your heart with Alice Cooper and his music. So, Zach, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit more of a rundown on who we're talking to this time?
As you mentioned, Matt, I mean, I do have a deep love for Alice Cooper. I mean, he was my first concert at 7 years old. So I've been following Alice Cooper over the years, and he only enlists the best musicians, which is why it was so awesome to get to talk to Ryan Roxie, a really incredible guitarist who has played with Alice on and off over the years. And just to also hear how he's keeping busy lately, whether it's from the podcast that he hosts to hosting live streams online, but also launching his own guitar lesson series, the System 12 Guitar Method. It was so cool to just hear him go in depth about that. You can just hear the passion that he has for the instrument. So I definitely recommend going to ryanroxie.com, ryanroxie.com, to learn more about just everything he's doing. But then, of course, as the Alice Cooper fanboy I am, just to hear him talk about getting to learn from Alice Cooper, getting to play golf from Alice Cooper, just, you know, how that's just been a huge influence on him, both professionally and personal. And then, you know, with There Goes My Hero, we talk about the time that they got to meet their musical heroes.
And you won't believe who we talked about.
But I mean, you know, getting to play with Alice Cooper, but then also just getting to hear how passionate he is about Cheap Trick, and getting to meet Rick from Cheap Trick for the first time. It's everything you really want to hear about the first time you get to meet your hero. Really a special thing to get to hear. And we really are excited to share with you. Without further ado, enjoy part 1 of our chat with Ryan Roxie. And again, visit ryanroxie.com to learn more about the System 12 Guitar Method, which he talks in depth about with us, as well as his podcast and live streaming and everything he's doing right now. So enjoy, and thanks for listening.
See ya.
Let's first start off with, you know, the golden question. How are you doing? How are you holding up with everything?
Like everyone else in the world, I am adapting to a new way of life. But in some ways, it's not that much different from being on tour. I spend a good amount of my time holed up in a hotel room, and then from the hotel room, we go onto the sort of social distanced bus, and then we have, from the bus, we go into the venue, and then we're in our dressing rooms. Of course, the dressing rooms are, the band has its own sort of group dressing room, but we would be responsible right now because our stations, makeup stations, all that stuff are 6 feet apart. I never thought of it that way. but we were literally always in some sort of indoors isolation in a way. And then, of course, when we play the show, that's our time to like actually really connect with people. And then, of course, before and after the shows. But yeah, now I'm just dealing. Most of the time I spend in my son's room, which you can see. It's not New York City. It's a picture of New York City, but it's my recording studio, and it's my filming studio, and it's where I'm doing my podcast as well, and a bunch of guitar-oriented content. So yeah, I'm kind of in a way holed up here, and it's okay for me, to be honest with you. I've really gotten a lot of creativity. I've got that creative bug since this all happened.
Now, are you normally in Sweden? Because it's like 10 o'clock here, 5 o'clock where you are, or are you based here in the U.S.? Or you're just kind of stuck
I'm normally on tour somewhere.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Knock on wood, I've been lucky enough to be normally like away in that sense of working. But yeah, on the times in between tours, I do have a place here in Stockholm. I live here with my wife, and she's actually South African, which makes the math even weirder. But from a previous marriage, I have 2 kids that are Ameriswedes, if you could say that. And
Okay.
it's half American and half Swedish, but they've grown up here in Stockholm for the most part. And watching them grow up, I was lucky enough to be able to do that for some years when I didn't play with Alice Cooper. A little break that I took in 2005 to basically 2012. And they've been just growing up, becoming, 17 and 15 now. So that's
wow.
That's hard to believe.
That really does, you never really believe it when people say, time goes so fast. And you always go, it's not. No, wait a second. It has come.
Congrats on surviving those ages too.
Well, I mean, it like anything, it's kind of timeless. I think of the type of teenager I was, and as long as my kids can not be as much of a nightmare as I was, which usually, doesn't work out that way sometimes. But if they can sort of, I think they have a lot more common sense than I did. I've always tried to take a step back and have common sense, but just been associated with crazy situations, whether it was a crazy girlfriend when I was quite young, or just crazy scenarios of living in Los Angeles in the mid 80s. That was just crazy circumstances. Let's just say that. So I think my kids have a much better foundation and base here, especially in Stockholm.
Okay. Now, we know how everything kind of is going on here in the U.S. We're on lockdown, got to stay 6 feet apart when you go out, mask, gloves. How is it in Sweden? Many people might not know what that's like.
Well, because I've been doing a bunch of interviews of late where that is one of the top questions is like, what is going on in Sweden? Because you hear that we are basically the only European country that isn't on lockdown. It's definitely not normal. It's not like normal life. There's definitely less traffic in Stockholm. There's less people riding the trains. There's less businesses open. It's the thing is that the businesses aren't forced to shut their doors. It's kind of done on a more voluntary level.
Okay.
And I feel that the mentality is way more about seeing what happens with real data, with real numbers. And a year from now, I think they're betting it all kind of averaging out. That being said, you have this paranoia feeling no matter what. These days we live in a world where there's a big paranoia and fear of, because you just don't know what this disease is and where it really comes from and where it's really spread and what are the actual effects of it. So I think Sweden's taken much more of that approach of we're going to wait and see. While we don't stop our economy, we're going to wait for the numbers to come out. See, because that's another thing that's never happened in the world, where you just stop an economy and then try and start it again.
Yeah.
So we don't know. We are the test tube babies of the new millennium, I guess.
That feels too.
That's
feels
definitely
too
a fair
real.
assessment.
There's some people out there that can't go out even if they wanted to. There are bars open. I think people pretty much try to social distance, but in this world, especially we live in a city, how can you really adhere to those rules? I adhere to them because I'm sort of a homebody anyway, and I'm, said 99% of the time I'm here. Maybe once or twice a day, I step outside. I'll walk down to the store, get some stuff for dinner, and then I'll just say, okay, that was my walk of the day.
Sounds very
no
similar.
one stops me. That's kind of like the difference. There's no, because I've been doing these podcasts where we have people that come in internationally through the chat, and there's some people in Italy say you can't leave outside without getting questioned. In other countries, it's much more severe. So as far as Sweden, it's pretty lax, but at the same time, there is a question mark, and we will find out, I guess, a year from now. And I guess they're betting on it all being kind of the same. If not, I guess it'll be total Armageddon, and they're already Vikings. They've already been through that, right?
I mean, it's just so much uncertainty. Not even just, everything in the world, but even just the music industry itself.
Our music industry has well, as so many other industries have. It's going to be a 180 degree in some ways, or at least we have to think that way. Temporarily, my music industry is shut down, never to be the same again. And my feeling is I'd rather be prepared to pivot and do something that's associated with music and what is going to be our new performance platform and our stage that we get to perform on, rather than saying, oh, when it gets back to the normal, that everything will be great then. I'd rather be pleasantly surprised and be happy to go back out on the road and go back to those meet and greets and go back to those festivals where 80,000 people are pushed straight next to each other for days on days. But think about it. Does our mentality really accept that now? Can you even think about going to a festival for 5 days with, 80,000 people? And so who knows what's going to happen in the future? But again, I'd rather be pleasantly surprised, but I'd also rather be prepared.
Yeah, that's kind of like what Paulo said when we talked to him. Paulo from Trivium, he kind of said that the bands kind of have to realign themselves and kind of think about what they're going to do next. And they've been doing acoustic performances online. Their lead singer and their guitar player have been doing that. So they have a lot of material. So yeah, that does kind of ring true with what a lot of other people are saying.
Oh, they're the kings. Matt Hafey is one of those kings of early on doing live streaming. He was doing it with his gaming before, and I call him the king of Twitch. He is. And he's very inspiring. But see, to be honest with you, he had that down to a science well before this lockdown happened. And him and Trivium, the band, they have this down, and they have a certain identity with their fans, and they have a relationship with their fans that really do embrace that online experience. He's very inspiring. I talked with him maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and him just actually talking about his routine made me feel like I was so tired after. I felt like I had worked out, but no, he like to practice and to work out the way he does, with not just physically, because he does do karate and jiu-jitsu, or I think it's some sort of martial arts online streaming, but plus the gaming, but then mostly just the constant riffing and singing. It was like, wow, that's inspiring, but damn, dude, you got to take a chill. Hey, chill pill once in a while. But you know what? He's got that work ethic, so God bless him.
But you know what? Hold on. Give yourself some more credit, because you have been keeping yourself really busy as well. I mean, not only with your podcast, with the live streams on Sundays, but even just the launch of your own lessons as well.
Well,
and that
thank you. It did light a fire under my ass. I mean, this whole thing of like, wait a second, you might not be on tour for a while. Definitely, when this all went down, the idea was, because I've been working on this guitar lesson method and this new System 12 guitar method for many, many years. I've kind of been working on it since I was 16, because I started teaching guitar lessons when I was 16. And it's all that experience of teaching people through the years, finding sort of the guitar life hacks that I'm able to find, and I've been able to see. It's take time to learn all that stuff, and right. Picking up something from this guitar player, picking up a tip or trick from this guitar player, all that time, and then surrounding myself with a sort of team of other teachers that wanted to create a new guitar method, a quick learning system. So we had been developing it, and the idea was it was going to be released, and the Kickstarter campaign was going to happen sort of midway through the first leg of the Alice Cooper tour. So we'd have enough time through 2 Alice Cooper legs of touring to sort of really promote it. And all of a sudden we got the call, well, these dates are postponed. It's kind of a bummer word when everyone hears postponed. They go, I don't know what that means. So, So anyway, the tour got postponed, and I immediately said, you know what? I have to start thinking right on the top of my head. We have to put this out, because if people are going to be actually stuck indoors, maybe this is the perfect time to put it out. But as I said, the whole reason for having the Kickstarter campaign was that we haven't finished the final version of it. But we had recorded the demo version. We call it the beta testing version. And we have that, and we're really happy with it, actually. There's just a couple of nooks and crannies that we have to, odds and ends that we have to tie up. But we're really happy with that beta testing version. So we said, look, if people donate to our Kickstarter campaign, which they'll get the final version, they can start learning right off the beta test version today. And that's exactly what we started doing. And so many people responded in such a positive way because all of a sudden there was this huge gap of time that they had to dive into their guitar journey. They might have been thinking about, I want to learn guitar someday. But now all of a sudden we're offering a course that will teach you all the fundamentals that you need to know in a really quick amount of time, 12 weeks. That's why we call it the System 12. System 12 has a lot of to do with the number 12. 12 notes total in music. When you're thinking about music, you go, how many notes are there? And you go, well, there's 7 notes with their sharps and flats. So that means 12 notes total. All right, cool. When you look at a guitar neck, it's really only 12 notes until the guitar neck repeats itself. Those double dots on that guitar neck, that signifies the 12th fret. Yep. So the number 12 just comes up again and again. So the name of the course was easy to come up with. And then, the response has been really amazing. So if anyone wants to check it out, It's just ryanroxie.com, and right on the front page it says, go to the Kickstarter.
I haven't picked up my guitar in some time, so maybe I'll give it a shot.
Well, this is a good course to, whether you're a beginner or you have been playing for a while, because even the intermediate players that we've had that have taken on this course say, there's a bunch of tips and tricks that I didn't realize and didn't look at the guitar that way. It's all about looking at the guitar a certain way. Sometimes we make it more complicated than it actually is. And guitar teachers, especially when you see someone on YouTube that just is so eons technically better than you feel you could get. It gets intimidating. So we take a very simple approach at first. I think we do things non-traditionally. For instance, first thing you learn when you're on playing guitar is your open chords, your first position chords, or your cowboy chords, if you will. And you're making your hand, who's never touched a guitar neck, do all these contorted, twisted things, where my feeling is why would you do that? That's going to do is uninspire a player. Teach people the notes where they are on the guitar neck so that you can eventually, with one finger, and then you can add a second finger to make what? A power chord. Because if you know power chords, then you can basically play any song that's ever been written.
Just hearing you describe the putting your fingers in different places, I'm getting arthritis just hearing that. So,
the way I got fatigued listening to Matt Hafey talk about his work ethic.
At what point were you just all right, show off? Let's talk about something else then.
No, it was. I kept going. I wanted to take notes. I really did, because I was like, man, it seems like he's again busier than when, and that's the way I kind of feel right now. I feel in some ways I'm busier now than I would have been on tour. Because in touring, you do pace yourself a little bit. And although my wife would tend to disagree, I feel playing golf every single morning is a very big part of that process. You see,
is that an influence from Alice, dare I say, or ask?
Oh, that's an exact, that's him passing the torch of, the golf rock and roll onto me. He's passed so many things on to me. I get, a lot of my wardrobe, to be honest with you. I get a lot of regifts from him. But, I also, he taught me how to play golf, and it taught me a sport and a way to sort of relax mentally that I think everybody should have at one point of their life. And it's kind of like guitar in that sense where, some people say, well, I don't make enough money, or I don't have enough time to play golf. And if you keep it that way, you'll never do anything, worth, any sort of skill. It's hard because it does take time to learn this skill. But at the same time, the fact that I was on tour with Alice, I had the perfect ambassador to learn from, because we got to go on every single cool golf course. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. The sacrifices are what? Waking up super early in the morning, and we're on the course usually every morning by 7:30 7 a.m., which means we're up at 6:30. But what does that do? That helps me not have a crazy ass after show party, not go, too overboard, keeps me in check in that sense, mentally grounds me and takes my mind off of stuff, even if it's just for a couple hours with playing golf. And like I said, I can equate it a lot to playing guitar, because that's what guitar rehearsing and guitar just jamming does for me sometimes. It takes my mind off of everything else, and I can just focus on the creative aspect of playing guitar or the motor skills part of playing guitar. I do separate the two. I say that you have to have sort of motor skills so your head and your hand know what they're doing at all times. And then you have to have some time where you let your heart into it, and you let your heart be the creative aspect, tell your head what to do, and then that's where the really kind of inventive stuff comes on, and hopefully end up writing a riff or two that allows you to buy every guitar you want.
That's awesome. I have to ask, because I know I'm a huge Alice Cooper fan, and I know how influential picking up golf has been for him, both personally and professionally. What was going through your mind the first time you actually played golf with Alice Cooper? Because I can't imagine that's something that you ever thought, starting to play guitar, that you'd actually be on a golf course with Alice Cooper.
Well, the first thing I thought was I hope I don't hurt anybody, because my swing was so bad. I mean, in a way, I didn't even really know where to start. And Alice said, look, just hold the club the way you would normally play baseball if you want to play baseball. Just swing it whether it's from the left. And here's the problem, because I'm left-handed, but I play guitar right-handed.
Oh,
interesting. A whole theory about that as well. A whole different theory about that. We can go into it. That would take a whole nother podcast probably. But I'm left-handed. Most of my coordination is there. And so I would play baseball hitting left-handed. But I had started as a right-hander. And so when I first picked up a golf club, it just felt right to swing as a right-hander would. Just the same way playing guitar felt right that way. So Alice said, do what feels right. So that's what I started doing, but the swing was still horrendous. It has been horrendous for many years up until very recently. But, like I said, most of the things I were thinking of is not to cause bodily harm or injury to anybody else on the course. And the first couple of years, I kind of almost did. I almost took out Rick Nielsen, because we were in Rockford, Illinois. And you have to understand, Cheap Trick's, as you know, one of my favorite bands of all time. And we got to go golfing with Rick and his son, and we're out on the course, and he's way, way over to the right. He had hit, but he drove his cart up a little bit. So he was waiting for me to do my shot, not thinking at all that I would shank it, to the right. If anything, I'm gonna hook it. But no, I just completely hit it right in his direction. He ducked and the ball went over, and he had a good laugh at it, but I think inside he was silently going, motherfucker, what are you doing?
And he hasn't talked to you since. I wonder why. No,
we actually we talk anytime we're in the area or we cross paths on tour. That those guys have been so cool to us, and we've had a great relationship. Obviously now with his son Dax playing drums in the band, it's so nice to have that family feeling whenever, because Alice Cooper, for all intents and purposes, is a big touring family. And when the two families came together, it was just, recently we played Rockford, and we played a theater where we played this theater where Rick Nielsen has his own checkerboard chair there still. Oh, wow. It's really cool. It's and they just, there's no big fanfare about it. There's no plaque or anything. And he told us the story about it and stuff. So I was all excited to play that show, and I wanted to show him, hey man, this is me getting to play for one of my guitar idols. And of course, as things would happen, when it's time for my big, huge guitar solo, what happens to my guitar? The wireless unit goes completely out. I have to, And I look over at the side of the stage where he was watching it from the monitor board, and he shrugs his shoulders and he goes, it happens.
Oh, that's too funny. That must be both horrifying, but also kind of reassuring that your hero's going, don't worry about it.
Exactly.
So,
it put my mind at ease.
So kind of segueing into talking about Cheap Trick, because we love to talk about with artists about the time that they met their heroes. When was the first time you actually met Rick?
The very first time I met Rick, it was at a record release party. And, I had overthought it. Here's another thing. If you ever want to meet your idols, don't overthink it. Don't visualize and all that kind of stuff about how it's going to go, because it's never going to go down the way you think it's going to go down. You're not going to end up partying all night with them. If anything, if you overthink it, they're just going to go, wow, he's a little bit crazy. You're going to be looking for that catcher in the rye in your back pocket. But the thing is, I went up to him and I thought I'd be real smart, and I thought I would ask him about chord changes to Taxman, Mr. Thief, right? Which is one of the coolest musically constructed songs, I think, of all time. Now, I always say one of the best structures of a song where people haven't really duplicated it yet is Surrender. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Great chord structure. It's got the modulation, but that doesn't sound cheesy. It's got a great, it's got a modulation in it, and you don't think of Bon Jovi. It's amazing. And and so, I was going to talk to him about this song Taxman off the Cheap Trick's first album. And of course, I started getting into it, and he was busy with some other people around, and it was kind of crowded after this record release party. He goes, yeah, great song. And he went back to his old thing, and I was like, wait a second, he didn't talk to me about all the chord changes and how you went from major to minor, and how important none of that happened.
What was the record release show for? Who was it? Cheap Trick's record?
It was one of Cheap Trick's records. Yeah, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and it wasn't really a big place. It was kind of a smaller place. It was kind of they did a couple songs, then they had the record release, then they played it in the bar, and people were just hanging out and stuff. So it was way before I had been in Alice. So awesome. Once we got into Alice, I was able to. There was a couple of years that went by, and I actually had that major rock and roll dream come true, where Cheap Trick and Alice Cooper were on tour together. And I actually had a podcast back then. I can't believe it now when I look back on it. Like I had gotten the idea from Adam Curry, who's kind of known as the podcaster, the godfather of podcasting. Yeah. And I guess I had read an article somewhere where he was doing this podcast. I said, well, I can do something like that. So I used to put something together on my really, really basic GarageBand, Mac program. And I wanted to make it like a variety show, kind of like I wanted to make it same thing I've always been trying to do it. I just want to make it like the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, but for rock and roll. And that's kind of a basic recipe that I had. And so then one of the thrills for me was and I called it Big Rock Show. And Big Rock Show had a bunch of episodes, and my crowning achievement was I got to interview Bunny Carlos and Rick Nielsen on it. And that was just, I was so thrilled.
That's cool.
And they opened up the show, but on tour with Alice, and they supported Alice, but then when we played Rockford, which was their hometown, we switched the bills where we supported Cheap Trick, and then they got the key to the city that night. And then afterwards, Eric Singer and myself went back to Rick's house, and Rick and his wife were so sweet to us. And Rick took us into his studio where he has a guitar vault, and then showed me his 1958 Flying V's and killer guitars and stuff. And you know what? I had never visualized that. That's why all the cool stuff happened then. So the difference is, the first time of meeting him, I thought all this stuff was going to happen and cool stuff, and he basically said, "Yeah, great song." But then, when I hanging out after the show, and he said, "Hey, you guys want to come back to the house? I'll show you some guitars and stuff." And then that all just happened. And so cool. I didn't think too much, and it ended up being one of those nights where both, Eric Singer and I were super, super excited.
It's so cool that you got to actually interview your idols. During that interview, what was the biggest thing you learned that surprised you?
I didn't know that Bunny Carlos was as much the musical sort of guru of the band as he was. He knows so much about all different types of music and all different types of bands. And he was the one that was making the when a band goes on stage, sometimes they have pre-show music, and a lot of times the bands make that pre-show music. He was always in charge of the mixtape before that, and it turns out that he's way more of that pop guy than I thought. I always thought because he looked jazz and he played with such an unorthodox sort of style that he would lend himself more to jazz, which I know he kind of likes that music, but at the same time, power pop is his thing, man. And if you ever listen to that band, I think it was Tinted Windows that he had together with James Iha and the singer of Hanson. I hope I'm not wrong. I think it's Tinted Windows. I think that's what it's called. Such a killer album, and such a killer power pop band. So loved it.
That's really cool.
So with you being as big of a Cheap Trick fan as you are, we have another show that we have called If You Have to Pick Three. If you had to pick three, what are your favorite Cheap Trick songs?
Cheap Trick songs. Wow. Okay. I think I would have had to have picked, just for sheer amount of times of me playing it, whether it's at a club or in a cover band or actually on stage with the guys, Surrender.
Okay.
It's a classic.
Yeah, because I said there's two songs that I really think are kind of classic songs, rock songs that the structure, everything is amazing. And they're both not really hard rock songs. They're kind of like catchy rock songs. But one of them is Surrender. The other one is SOS by the band ABBA. I just think that that song is just incredible.
You know what? I don't think ABBA gets enough credit.
You love you some ABBA.
I do here in Sweden. They do here in Sweden. I'll tell you that much.
But I think they don't get enough credit for even the influence that they've had on so much rock that followed in the 70s, because they know how to write a great pop song. They know how to write a great hook.
There's a lot of bands that don't get enough credit, and I'm happy when people come up to me and they have said, hey, this album that you were associated with helped me influence the way I wanted to play guitar and stuff like that. And it's kind of whether it's Electric Angels or whether it's Slash the Snake Pit, the second record, which is Ain't Life Grand, or whether it's one of my solo records, Roxy 77, I get a kick out of people actually saying that it had some sort of positive influence on them. But I think there's a lot of bands that are really influential as far as, like, I don't think there would be a genre because of them. And I always cite Hanoi Rocks for being one of those bands that if there wasn't a Hanoi Rocks, I don't know so much if there would have been a Guns N' Roses. Of course, because it's very easy to say, oh, well, Guns N' Roses, the evolution of Aerosmith. Of course, they had a bit of blues rock and stuff like that. But the whole, taking that glam element, taking that sort of song element as well. Hanoi Rocks wrote such great songs as well. And just those album covers visually, to see Andy McCoy and Michael Monroe and the whole band really just have such a strong image was like, I knew it affected me. It definitely influenced my clothing choices, and I'm sure it did Axl's and Slash's as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So am I still going on three songs? I've totally lost track here. I started with Surrender. Taxman off the first album.
Obviously, yeah.
I really love Taxman. And then the third one is it's a tough one because, for me, pretty much any song off of In Color or Heaven Tonight is my favorite, right? It's just so, like, I can listen to both those albums and I go, I don't have a favorite because I can just go on and on and on. But then I go, you know what? I'll go for the hidden gem that's on Dream Police, which is Gonna Raise Hell.
Okay.
Because I love the fact that it starts off vibey. It's got that 12-string bass. And then Robin Zander is just singing so balls out the entire song. Is gonna raise hell, and his voice just gets so it's so growly. It was before growl was growl, but at the same time, it's pop. There's sort of a melodic sense to it. And then, of course, the very end, you got these sort of Beatlesque strings that come in. So, yeah, that would have to be my three.
I feel like that album, Dream Police, I mean, among Cheap Trick fans, obviously, it gets a lot of credit, but I don't really think Dream Police gets enough credit just amongst mass fans of rock for as like
It was a very strange
pushy
year,
boundary.
1979. It was a weird year because everybody was like anticipating the 80s, and we were going through a transition. It was like, right before punk rock really took off and new wave took off and stuff, so Cheap Trick was on a roll. It was kind of like, in some ways, it was the height of what I think it was one of or the two where they started headlining, the moment where they started headlining arenas and stuff. So I think you were starting maybe to get that backlash, because fans were always used to seeing Cheap Trick as the ultimate opener, opening up for AC/DC, opening up for Kiss, always kicking ass all the time. Then all of a sudden they're a headliner, and it's like, wait a second, who are these guys? Who do they think they are? So, I don't know, but I like I said, those three songs: Surrender, Taxman, and Gonna Raise Hell. Wrap it up.
I think that is the definite list then
Put a bow
of
on
Cheap Trick songs. We dare anyone to challenge that.